So welcome to the first of many little videos that I'm going to be making on slow stitching and embroidery. My name's Sherry and I'd just like to share with you some of the joy that I get from my stitching. So the first thing is, what do I mean by slow stitching? How is slow stitching different to any normal stitching? I'm just going to tell you what slow stitching means to me. And if it means something different to you, that's absolutely fine. For me, it is stitching in the moment, and that means that I will have around me my needle and threads, scraps of fabric, bits of lace, all sort of things that I love to have around me, and I will incorporate that into my sewing as I go along. How I feel at the time, I put a bit of fabric where I want to at the time, so it's mindful, it's in the moment. Now that can include a little bit of embroidery that you may have done, and you might say, well, that's not, that's following a pattern. It can be, it can also just be drawn freehand, or you can just do it in the moment. That's up to you. But also, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about embroidery as if it's slow stitching, if it's in the moment. And I like to incorporate embroidery onto my slow stitching, which is what I'm going to do in the first little thing that I'm going to make with you today, which is going to be a little slow stitch pincushion. Also, it's kind of, if you think of art, if you think of someone painting an oil painting or a watercolour, so botanical painting is very much drawing something so that it's a faithful representation of that flower as close as you can onto paper. But also you could do a watercolour and think, oh, actually I'm going to add that into it, or I'm going to add this, I'm going to add that colour. Or you might start off with an oil painting having an idea of how you want it to look, but it may change along the way. And that's really kind of what slow stitching is. You might have a cluster of materials around with you, but you may end up using something completely different. And it's a bit like this has a little bit of embroidery on it, but that's all what I consider to be slow stitching, because I just made that thinking I'm going to add this, now I think I'm going to add that. And also it will be special to you, it will be completely unique, and it will reflect the fabrics that are on here will be fabrics you love. There'll be old clothing, they could be bits of fabric that you've saved because you can't bear to throw them away, and that's what slow stitching is all about. So grab your scraps of fabric and let's get stitching. So the first thing I like to do when I'm slow stitching is actually to kind of set the mood. I love to light a candle. I've got a thing for candles. I just love having that glow there, but also the lovely fragrance, and it sort of signals this is my time now where I'm going to sit and do some sewing. So I've got a little candle here. Also, just say if you do light a candle, make sure it's away from all of your fabrics, because obviously fabrics are flammable. So mine's on a little saucer, but do make sure that it's not near to any of your fabrics when you're sewing. The other thing I like to do is pour myself a drink, and that can be a glass of water, it could be a glass of wine, it could be a hot chocolate, a herbal tea, whatever it is you like to drink. I just think it's lovely to have your candle and your drink nearby. And what do you like? Do you like to listen to music? Do you have a book you're listening to? Maybe it's your favourite. I love to have Gilmore Girls in the background when I'm stitching. Your favourite film, or maybe you just like to sit quietly. Whatever works for you. Just get yourself in the zone so that you're thinking, okay, this is my time. I'm going to stitch. And one of my favourite places to stitch is actually in the garden, just to go outside, and if you're lucky enough to have birdsong around you, running water, that kind of thing, the trees rustling, that's the best. But wherever you stitch, just make sure it's a lovely, calm, peaceful place for you to be, in so much as you can. You may have young children running around and it's not as calm, but it can still be what you've made your space for stitching. What about your fabrics? What are you going to use? Maybe you don't have a lot of fabrics. Maybe you're completely new to sewing. You'll be amazed actually what you have. I have little scraps of fabric, some of them very small. I'll show you some of my little things. Now these are quite scrappy little bits. that I keep. I mean, that's pretty small. That's really small. I can't throw little bits like that away because I think I love that. I think I've got to use that. So I'll have little scraps of fabric and I just tie them up into little bundles so that I can pick them up depending what colours that I want to use when I'm stitching. Sometimes if I've got favourite bits of lace or bits of fabric, I'll stitch them together so that I keep them together, just a few little bits. Or however you keep your fabrics or whatever you have. So your own wardrobe, first of all. I don't throw anything away. I keep all of my clothes. If they're worn out and they can't be stitched anymore, then I love that fabric, so I'm going to use that. You can go to a second-hand shop, a vintage shop, and pick clothes up. You're not looking for something that's going to fit you. You're looking for fabric that you love. Look at children's clothing. There's some beautiful fabrics you get in children's. Don't throw away your pillowcases because you can embroider on them. You can tea and coffee dye them, which is something I'll go into in another video. If it's fabric and you like it, keep it. That's what I would say to you. Just keep it, because this is a selvage of linen. I just keep things, and then, like I said, if I've got enough of them, these are my tea stained bits of fabric. I bundle them up, and then look at the interest you can get on fabric if you tea stain it. That's another video. So that's your fabric. So don't rush out and buy them, because you will have them. You'll be amazed at the fabrics that you've got. So the next thing is, what about threads? What threads can you use? The answer to that, honestly, is anything. Depends what you have to hand. You can make anything work. So, for example, DMC or any brand anchor of embroidery floss, where you get 6 strands. You can use 1 strand, 2 strand, or 6 strands. You make your mind up how you want your stitches to look. You can also pick up threads and cottons really easily, actually, in second-hand shops, thrift shops, etc. You often see bundles of threads. If I ever see a bundle of threads, I just get them, because sooner or later I'll use them. So these are regular DMC threads, anchor, any kind of embroidery floss. You can also get, I've been using this, which is the 6-strand Aurifil one, which I really like. Regular sewing thread is absolutely fine to use, depending on, I do a lot of applique on my slow stitching as well, because I love sewing fabric onto fabric. It's one of my favourite things to do. So regular sewing thread, or the very thin applique thread, you can use that too if you have it. You can use, these are my hand-dyed threads. These are BFL silk, so they're a little bit thicker. You can use pearl embroidery thread, which I don't have with me. You can use, this is linen thread. You can use tapestry wool for either stitching with it or for couching, which is really lovely. Again, I just pick these up whenever I see them. Scraps of, this looks like mending sort of thread to me. That's something I picked up secondhand. Yarn. You can use yarn again to stitch with, or for couching, all different thicknesses of yarn. So you can honestly use what you have and what the effect that you want in your stitching. Have a look, see what you've got. And one of the fun things to do with slow stitching is to choose your colours, get your fabrics together, find any threads that you may have, and think about how you want it to look. And a quick word about needles. So, because I do get asked quite a lot about needles, and I will do a separate video on it actually, because it's enough for a standalone video. I tend to use embroidery needles. Embroidery needles have slightly longer eyes. I tend to use embroidery needles for most of my stitching, to be honest, rather than sharps, which have the smaller eye at the top. I don't actually have one here to show you. The rule of thumb is, this is a really thick one that I'm using here, because I've got quite thick yarn thread in there. If you can thread your cotton or whatever you're using through your needle and it doesn't pull, when you put it through your fabric, if you're putting it through and it goes through nice and easily and you're not tugging it and you can't feel it pulling, then it's probably the right needle that you're using. If it comes undone, if it keeps coming out of your needle, you're probably just using one with too big an eye. Don't worry too much about it. Just use, again, this is my needle book, and look, that's all I've got left in there. So actually, I just tend to use whatever I have. Don't worry too much about it. If all you have is your regular sewing needle and you haven't got any embroidery needles, don't worry, use that. That's fine. If you can get your cotton through, it will work well for you. The other thing I wanted to say before I get going is what kind of thing we're going to be making. Today we're going to do a little pincushion similar to this. I'm going to start it today. It's probably going to be a two-part video because I've already been nattering on for a while. Slow stitching, there's lots of different styles of slow stitching. You have got piece cloth, which is what I'm going to show you today, which is this kind of thing, where you've got lots of bits of cloth all stitched together to make another piece of cloth. And the lovely thing about this is you can use favourite bits of fabric, scraps of fabric. Fabrics evoke memories, don't they? It can be a blouse. Oh, you remember when you bought that blouse, or it might be something, it might be your children's clothes that you've kept, and sometimes we keep clothes and we think, why am I keeping them? What am I doing with them? You can use them in your stitching. So this is pieced cloth. There is also this kind of stitching, where you have a base piece of fabric and you stitch onto it. And again, here I've used embroidery, etc. A few little embroidery stitches, and I love adding words into my stitching. I'll do something like this next time, but today I'm going to do the piece cloth. You can make embroidery, needle cases, you can make pincushions, you can make box pouches, you can make cushions, anything at all. So let's get going. Also, the other thing I should have said earlier about threads, obviously if you're a sewer, if you're a stitcher, a quilter, if you've ever made dresses, you're going to have scraps everywhere. So what I'm using, as I've said, you use what you have to hand. We have something called the Selvage Chronicles Stitch Club, which is fabrics, vintage and new, that I collate every month for slow stitching. So I thought if you have bought this one, then this gives you an idea of how you can use it really. Also, if you have bought this one, you won't have exactly the same necessarily as I've got in here, because a lot of these are vintage. Not everybody gets exactly the same thing. But obviously you do not need this at all. You can use anything you have, and you don't need anything like this. You could start off with 3 bits of fabric and make something absolutely lovely. So what I would do is, this is already kind of colour themed because it's in a pack, but what I would normally do is choose a couple of bits of fabric. Things like this I would use to embellish it afterwards. So choose a couple of bits of fabric. Just having a quick peek through. Let's have that and that and that. Those 3. I'm going to go with those 3. So what I would do is straight away I would make that smaller because that is too big. And then you can just stitch this together. If you wanted to, you could just put right sides together and stitch this together in a normal seam. But I'm going to show you the way I like to do it, just because I like the texture it gives. So you have this is how it looks on the back. But it gives it a really lovely texture. So that's why I like stitching it like this. This is not my idea. People have been stitching like this for probably hundreds of years. So you fold this over, and you fold over so your right side is on the top. I don't measure anything, I just go by eye because it's slow stitching. You don't want to be measuring. So you've got your right side here, your right side here, and you put your right sides together and you match them here. So if you were to open it, these are your right sides. And then just pop a pin in. I use these little applique pins, which you can see is bent, because you don't stab yourself with them. And then I have got 2 strands of embroidery cotton, and I'm just going to do a knot and start stitching. So you've got your pieces of fabric here. So what you're stitching here is the seam from the back. So like I said, this is your right side, so you folded it over and you just start stitching. So start in the corner And what I normally do is, she said, actually I've just stitched straight into my knot. What were the chances of that? I normally start off by doing a little knot on the first one. Going over again, and then all you're doing is little stitches across the top. Now, how you stitch this is up to you. You can do tiny little stitches and just bite the fabric so you can't see it. I like to do fairly big stitches so that I take a fair chunk of the fabric, because I'll do another couple of stitches and then I'll show you the other side. If you now look at the other side, so this is the right side, you can just see the stitches. I should have used a dark thread, but you can just see your stitches like you can on here. You can see all the little stitches going along in the seam and the stitches that I'm just about to do on the top. I like that. I like to be able to see the stitches. For me, that's part of it. She said, completely having lost her needle. Seeing the stitches is part of it, so I like to do it, and I change my thread up all the way through. So this is quite light thread actually. I might use a dark brown next time, or a white. To use whatever thread you want to. You might decide to use bright pink against all creams. Your choice. You do what you want. So you're just going along doing these little stitches, and all the time you're doing these little stitches, you're thinking, you're putting the world to rights, or trying, or you're having lovely memories, or you're sorting out your problems, or you're listening to a book, or you've got something on in the background, and it's just restful and mindful. And you can do this with any scrap of fabric that you have. So, have you had a busy day today, or have you had a restful day? I find I do most of my stitching of an evening at the end of a busy day, which is why I was saying it's important for me to kind of set the scene, you know, light my candle and think, right, this is my time, I'm going to sit quietly now. Sometimes you might find that you can stitch in the garden of a day or something delicious like that. So that is going to be cut off. Then when I finish, when I get to the end here, do an extra little stitch at the end, and for good measure you can just put a knot in if you want to, but that's not necessary. And then put your needle through and bring it up. So bring your needle up, and then what I like to do, as you can see on here, is I like to do these little stitches, because I like how it makes the fabric feel, and I love the look of it. And I do them so that you can see them. And it's up to you. You could do running stitch along here as well. You could just decide to do a nice running stitch. If you want to, you can take little bites. And then when you've got to the end, you turn around and go back up the other side. They go in there, straight up the other side. Give it a little tug, and then I go back the other way. Don't worry if your stitches are not even, that doesn't matter at all. and then knot it off. And that's your first two bits put together. To do my knot, I just lay my needle down, wind the thread around a couple of times, kind of hold the thread there, hold the knot, pull your needle through, and then I just go through the fabric again for good measure, and then cut it off. So that's your first two bits of fabric put together, and as you can see, they're quite substantial, so if you did want to make a cushion or something like that, they're not going to go anywhere. So now you decide, what do you want to do now? So I'm going to cut this because that's too long. In fact, that's way too long. I'm going to do it about there. You can make your pincushion any size you want. I'm not going to tell you sizes. You decide. You could do it 4 times the size of that if you want to. So now I'm going to fold that over again and add another bit on there. And then when I've done that, I will come back and show you how I add the next piece. So just choose your piece of fabric. I'm going to go with that again, I think. Actually, I might like that there. I'm going to go that side. So again, you're folding your fabric over. So you're folding away from you, keeping your right side on the top. Fold your next piece of fabric over again. I love texture on fabric. Finger press it along. So again, you've got your right side here, you put your right side up to your right side again, pin it and stitch it. So I've joined those 3 bits together, and then what you can do at this point is just trim up, making sure you don't cut any of your stitches. Just trim up the fabric if you want to. You don't have to. Sometimes it just makes it a little bit easier for you when you're lining up your bits of fabric. So that's what I've got so far, and what I think I'm going to do, because this is quite a small pincushion, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to add a little piece on the top. Afterwards I'll show you how to embellish it afterwards, because that's a really fun bit. So I'm going to choose another bit of fabric for the top, and I think I'm going to go for these 2. So what I'll do is join these 2 together, or I could just put that along the top, which is nice. No, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to join these 2 together. Sorry, I'm just hunting around still, making sure I like that. Yeah, I'm going to join these 2 together, and then I'm going to add those 2 to the top, and then I will embellish it. I'll come back and embellish that in the next video for you. So I'm just going to join those bits, and then basically what you keep doing is you keep joining them. You can add 2 or 3 bits, or you can add on here, or you can sew another 2 bits together and then add that on, which is what I'm going to do. So in case I've made that complicated, so you're not understanding, I only need that to be about that wide. So I'm going to rip that and cut that, because that's linen, so it won't rip. And then what I'm going to do then is join these 2 here. So the idea is that they'll join along there. So finger press that down. So I'm going to join those in the same way, and then I'll show you when I've done that. So I've joined those bits together in the same way that we did before, and I'm now going to join this onto here. I don't want that seam there, that's better. So I'm going to join it like that. So in the same way, you're folding that in and finger pressing. And then doing the same with that, so that's how I want it to be. So that's the bit I'm folding over. And then lining that up because I want that to go there. So lining that up there, a couple of pins. And I'm going to cut that off now because that's going to annoy me otherwise. I'll definitely reuse that. And then I'm using a little silk thread here because I wanted to. And I'm just going to join those two together. So when that's joined, once I've started sewing, you'll see. So I've used a darker thread as well so that I can see it through, and I also thought it would fit well with the colours. I'll do another couple of stitches and then you can see how that looks. So now if I open that, you can see that the stitches are really nice and visible, and so that's going to be making it a little bit wider. And then it's up to you, you can add another bit on the end, you can do another strip and add it down the other side. You can make this any size you want it to be, any shape. I will probably add maybe one more on the end there. And then you've got to do exactly the same for the other side in using all different fabrics. And then we will come back in the next video and embellish it and make it super pretty. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Do let me know in the comments if anything didn't make sense to you, if you'd like me to explain anything more, and if there's anything that you'd particularly like to see. I've got so many videos planned on both embroidery and slow stitching because there are so many different aspects of stitching to talk about really, and so many different ways to embellish a piece, which, oh, it's lovely. So happy stitching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you for part 2.